Anime is officially $3 billion more popular internationally than Japan, confirms new study. This news isn't really that surprising. It really isn't. Anyone that's been paying attention to what's been going on in the anime and manga industry for a few years now saw this coming. However, this article here does point out a few things that even I was unaware of, and actually is some pretty big bombshells. Like bombshells that just really showcase the significance of anime booming, but also the rippling effect it's going to have on the entirety of anime and manga going forward for years upon years to come. Good and bad, by the way. But I want to read this article, and then we'll go over the individual bombshells of what it actually talks about and what even surprised me. Japan's anime industry has officially hit a staggering new milestone, and its international audiences who are now the primary engine for this explosive growth, with overseas markets pouring in over $3 billion more than the entire domestic Japanese audience. Per Deadline, a new report from the Association of Japanese Animations, AJA, presented at TIFCOM by Megami, a committee member at AJA, it revealed that the anime industry grew by 14.8% in 2024 to hit a record of $25 billion or 3.8 trillion yen. This surge was fueled by overseas revenue, which soared to 14.25 billion to 2.17 trillion yen, accounting for 56% of all income. In the contrast, the domestic market brought in United States $10 billion, almost $11 billion, 1.67 trillion yen, or 44% of the market share. So to break this down into more simplistic terms for those that didn't understand, pretty much in terms of domestic revenue, only 44% of all revenue for anime is from Japan, while the other 56% is outside of Japan. This might seem like not that big of a deal, but basically, anime has grown to such a point that it is now more profitable outside of Japan than actually within Japan. And it kind of makes sense when you think about, like, the amount of population and people. I mean, let's be honest here. Japan has a finite of population in their country, and if pretty much everybody in Japan's already been exposed to anime, eventually the numbers are going to flatline to the point where there's not going to be some exponential growth anymore. So the reason why it's so significant, why you see this big trend, and it's increasing in terms of, like, domestic or international sales in this case, is because anime is booming, becoming more popular, more places around the world are becoming aware of it or gaining access to anime in different shapes and forms, and so now they're able to buy products or watch anime or whatever, go to movie theaters about anime. They're able to do stuff like this, which means that it's a market that is growing, and it's going to continue to grow to the point to where maybe Japan's percentage in terms of, like, how much money Japan is making in terms of the 100% of anime, it might whittle down to maybe 20% of all revenue for anime of that year, which is kind of crazy to think about. But in the grand scheme of things, if anime is given access worldwide, obviously, if you have a country that has billions of people, you know, and they're given access to anime for the first time to watch it, then yeah, the number is going to astronomically increase to the point where it might dwarf Japan's, domestic revenue. But yeah, this is, honestly, it's just typical statistics. It's, typical trends and growth of anime, but it's a pretty big deal. It showcases that even in these early stages of anime growing, it's now already outpaced Japan, which I'm curious to see just how much it's going to grow in the coming years, and how the discrepancy between the domestic, revenue, like Japan, like, kind of separates from the actual international revenue. And I'll get more into this topic in a moment, because it's a pretty big deal about, like, the, what could theoretically change anime and manga forever because of this. But let's continue reading. This international dominance is reflective of a trend that has been solidifying for years. The AJA's report, which analyzed over 2 decades of data, highlighted 2020 as the first year international sales surpassed domestic revenue, which I've covered already in a video in the past, largely due to revenue generated by global streaming platforms, aka like Crunchyroll, Netflix, and stuff, during the pandemic. Though the domestic market briefly reclaimed the lead back in 2021, overseas revenue definitely pulled ahead in 2023 with a 51% share, and it has now increased to a 56% majority in 2024. So that is a massive jump. You gotta imagine this, okay? 51 to 56% might not seem huge, but you got to think about this from a statistic point of global revenue. That 4% increase, or in this case, no, that's a 5% increase, my bad, I can't math properly. This 5% increase is massive. Imagine, like, if they're making trillions of yen, okay? A 5% increase on like 3 trillion yen is a lot of money, okay? So that's the point here, is that their revenue is growing and growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger as time goes on, and it has no no sight, or there is no ending in sight so far. Like the actual like flatlining point is not even in sight yet, because the mountain is getting higher and higher as revenue keeps climbing. And the fact that it jumped just in 1 year with this percentage, imagine what it's going to say next year. Because I mean, you got to think about it. This year alone, there was that whole craze with just Demon Slayer. Like, just let's look at Demon Slayer this year on what it did and how it broke records in the box office. That's not including Chainsaw Man right now. That's also in the movie theaters. When you factor all this type of stuff in, it starts to put in perspective that this 56% most likely might turn into a probably a 60, 70% in the next few years. I could definitely see it. According to Onuchi, this growth trend is only set to continue. Overseas revenue is now climbing high and has not yet reached the peak. Onuchi stated, pointing to the 160 anime-related events now held across 50 countries as proof of this expanding footprint. Onuchi also suggested that future growth could come from secondary businesses such as merchandising and events, as the current revenue model is still heavily reliant on streaming licensing. That's a pretty big deal, by the way. I think that is not being really discussed. This is one of those bombshells I was talking about, is the fact that they're seeing this much revenue increase for anime, and it's just because of streaming platforms, aka like Crunchyroll, for instance. It's not even factoring in, like, you know, merchandising. Like, if there is a business that really starts to go all in on merchandising for anime and manga and stuff and different goods, this actual stuff might boom even higher. It would get a lot higher than it currently is, and that's just the crazy part, is because right now they're mostly just reliant on the streaming license than anything else. The anime industry is a cornerstone of the Japanese government's New Cool Japan strategy, which has set an ambitious goal of reaching $130 billion, or 20 trillion yen, for its content industry, including anime, manga, and video games by 2023. This strategy is built on a proven track record, as from 2013 to 2023, overseas content sales generated an estimate of $39 billion. The export value of Japan's entertainment industry now exceeds that of its steel, petrochemical, and semiconductor sectors. That one right there is insane. This is probably one of the biggest bombshells of this entire article. Let's put this in perspective. Japan's entertainment industry, aka like anime and stuff, has exceeded the revenue of steel, petrochemical, and semiconductors. That is crazy. These are products that are used in, like, you know, creating things, buildings, actual, like, architecture, creating maybe chips or electronics, whatever. These things that are very important to society, so to speak. That stuff that is in everyday use, a lot of people use this type of stuff. It has been surpassed by anime, or the Japanese entertainment industry. You realize how insane that is? Like, they are legitimately becoming so massive that I could definitely see them, like, really forcing Hollywood to change in the future. Like, really causing Hollywood to take a step back and think about what they need to do to improve upon their content because of this type of situation. This is a massive deal here, and I don't think a lot of people are really reporting on this subject of this article or what's being talked about enough. I feel like that is the biggest bombshell out of anything that you could get from anime just reaching new heights of popularity. Anyways, let's continue reading. However, despite its massive growth, certain long-standing and critical problems have plagued the industry to date. The sector is infamous for its personal shortage issues, fueled not just by a lack of talent, by systematic issues of overwork. Low pay, precarious employment, animators, especially those in entry-level and freelance positions, often face punishingly long hours, alongside wages that can fall well below the minimum, leading to burnout. Industry veterans, including the Eva creator, Anno, and Cowboy Bebop creator Watanabe, have repeatedly warned that this unsustainable culture threatens the future of anime production. Recognizing that its most valuable culture export is at risk, Japan has begun to implement new support structures. The government recently unveiled the Global Anime Challenge, or GAC, a program designed to channel resources into nurturing and supporting up-and-coming animators to create a more sustainable infrastructure. This effort is joined by nonprofit organizations like the Nippon Anime and Film Culture Association, which works to improve the working conditions and provide critical training for creators, aiming to protect the industry and its artists for future generations. So, pretty much this right here, these last two big paragraphs, is more or less tackling the problems I think we've all seen discussed for years upon years upon years. Japan obviously is aware of the issue. A lot of people are. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at these numbers, and you take a look at how, I'm just going to keep it blunt, how cheap anime is to make in comparison to something like a Hollywood movie, it's, I feel like money is going to play a bigger factor with these companies than the trying to invest in animators or invest in paying them better. I feel like what's probably going to happen is that Hollywood and these other companies are going to see this. They're going to be like, anime's so cheap to make. We can pour millions upon millions of this and make the same amount of revenue that we would if we poured $500 million into something. I can see that being a problem to where it's going to lead to more work being thrown on animators to the point to where they literally bleed their animators dry to where everything becomes pretty much freelanced. I mean, we already are theoretically having that issue. There is a lot of anime nowadays that they outsource a lot of their episodes to freelance companies or people that's not even in Japan, people around the world just to work on an episode. I mean, hell, let's think about like the latest One Punch Man episode that came out last weekend. Majority of the episode was freelanced to a completely different company, freelanced to people that don't even live in Japan. So when you factor that in, there's already issues with that, and I feel like the growth of anime is going to magnify those problems even worse than it already is. Maybe I'm doom posting and I'm just kind of saying something that might not actually happen, but we already have evidence that it's going that direction. I'll leave it at that, though. I thought this was very fascinating. What do you think? Do you think that the future of anime is bright or bleak? Be honest in the comments below. I love you guys. Be safe. Stay healthy. Leave a comment. Helps with the algorithm. Chibi out.